Building a dream home is a momentous event in one's life. Let me share the story of my marital relationship, which began to crumble right after reaching such a pinnacle of happiness. I am Angela, 30 years old, and my family consists of my 35-year-old husband, Mark, and our 3-year-old daughter, Rosa. We finally decided to build our dream house. While most people would envision a smooth sailing life overflowing with happiness, it wasn't the case for me. Recently, we faced endless concerns about the house under construction and Mark's parents. The first sign of our relationship's deterioration appeared when we left Rosa at Mark's parents' house. Both of us work full-time, leaving little time on weekdays. We primarily ventured out on weekends for house hunting and design consultations. When we took Rosa with us, she would get bored and cranky, so we usually left her with my parents nearby. However, one morning, my dad fell ill and went to the hospital, meaning they couldn't look after Rosa. I thought of canceling our plans for the day, but Mark suggested leaving her at his folks' place. Honestly, I don't get along well with his parents, Tom and Betty. They believe they can say whatever they want to their son's wife without any restraint. Outdated thinking, really. Plus, I felt uneasy asking them to suddenly take care of a toddler. But if we postponed our plans, the house completion would be delayed too. Reluctantly, we decided to entrust Rosa to Mark's parents just for that day. After finishing our errands, we bought some fancy desserts as a gift and went straight to Mark's parents' place. We arrived in the evening, and perhaps due to the desserts, Tom and Betty were in a good mood. We thanked them and left. On the way home, Rosa asked, "Where's Grandpa and Grandma's room in the new house?" I was taken aback and asked what she meant. Did they ask her about it? What did she tell them? Rosa started chatting with her stuffed penguin, seemingly ending the conversation. She referred to my parents as Granddaddy and Granny, and Grandpa and Grandma could only mean Mark's parents. Maybe they're curious if they'll have a room when they come over, I thought back then. Since then, Mark's parents often started visiting during weekday evenings and holidays, specifically when we were home. Currently, to save money for our new house, we're living in an old, small rented apartment. Whenever Mark's parents arrive, they make themselves at home, asking to see the documents for the house under construction. Before I could object, Mark would happily show them, enthusiastically explaining everything. It's irritating enough that they come over so frequently. Then Betty would shoot rapid-fire questions, mostly at me, just like a congressional hearing. It's not Mark who's in the hot seat. It's me. Somewhere, the speaker is raising his voice. "Mrs. Angela, looking at these plans, the location of the kitchen is not practical, right? Please change it, and we need more living rooms. Everyone, when they age, finds living rooms comforting. Plus, having only one kid's room. What if you have another child?" I'm sorry, that last bit was a joke. Thankfully, I'm not actually being grilled on population decline. Now it seems it's my turn to respond. Mrs. Betty, based on discussions with my spouse and following the proper procedures, we've already consulted with the contractors and foundation work has started. Any changes to the layout are now impossible. Please understand? I answered, slightly irritated. Then came the barrage of questions about furniture and appliances. Betty claims to be a home expert. I have a lot of friends, and I've visited various homes, observing various rooms in detail. With my refined eye, I can immediately tell if a room is cozy or if the furniture has good taste. This house, this room, not good at all. It'll bring bad luck, and your work will suffer. It's the worst, she said. She's got some nerve. She's like a pesky mosquito. Betty was so annoying that, in jest, I almost said, "How about making it a two-family home? And we split the costs." Just kidding, but then his parents were furious. "You expect us to pay? How disrespectful. A two-family home? I hate the idea. It feels too distant and lonely." They left in a huff that day. Good riddance. Who needs parents like them anyway? That night, after putting Rosa to bed, Mark approached me, clearly frustrated. "Hey, my folks are just trying to give us advice for our own good. Don't be so cold to them." Cold? I didn't mean to be, but isn't it your parents who are way more rude? Always butting in with every little thing about our house. It feels like they always want to be superior, treating me like I'm less just because I'm the daughter-in-law. They're just parents. That's what they do. Calling their advice rude is a harsh thing to say. Sometimes I think you can't understand others' feelings at all. Geez, cool your head and reflect on it. After that, Mark turned his back and refused to say another word. Sure, they are your parents, but it's our separate household. Besides, we haven't received any financial support from his parents at all. Giving no money but still butting in. What else would you call that if not rude? Mark told me to cool down, but instead, I became more frustrated and had trouble sleeping that night. One thing led to another, and finally, our house was completed. Our family moved, excitedly beginning a new chapter in our lives. Just as we were settling in, Mark dropped a bombshell. Starting today, my parents will be living with us. The bigger room upstairs will be for my dad, and a smaller one for my mom. Shouldn't be a problem, right? Wait a minute, where is this coming from? We have decided one of those rooms upstairs was for Rosa. I didn't agree to live with your parents. What if Tom and Betty say we don't like that room? Don't worry, they've already seen the rooms and they're fine with it. Tom and Betty have seen the rooms. When? The day before we checked out the house. Hold on, you're saying that Tom and Betty saw this house the day before our tour? Yeah, they wanted to see it, so I lent them the keys. It's just a look, no harm done. He seemed to think the conversation was over and went back to working on the TV's wiring. No harm done. Wrong. Harm was done, and a lot of it. I didn't want to see Mark's face, so I left the kitchen, unpacking half-finished, and went upstairs. I locked the door behind me, trying to calm my mind filled with confusion and anger. I was glad I had dropped Rosa off at daycare because of the moving mess. Thanks to that, I had a moment to think alone with Mark's sudden announcement of living with his parents. I had had enough of him, Tom, and Betty. I didn't want to spend another second with any of them. But we had just made a huge purchase in buying a house. I need to be calm and think clearly, considering what I should and shouldn't say for the future of Rosa and me. I stayed locked in the room, thinking deeply, waiting for Tom and Betty's arrival. As Mark had said, his parents arrived in the afternoon with a truck full of their belongings. At least greet us properly. How thoughtless of you. Oh my, things aren't organized at all here. How slow. After some complaints, Tom and Betty nonchalantly entered our new home. Listening closely from upstairs, I came out of the room and headed to the entrance. Tom, Betty, I wasn't informed about living together. I was surprised at how cold my voice sounded. Tom seemed irritated and quickly blamed me. I told Mark, that should be enough. No, it's a problem. I only found out about your intention to live with us this morning, and I have no intention of living with you too, especially after the way you've acted. What? Mark agreed to it. Do you think it's okay for a wife to go against her husband? Exactly. Such a cheeky daughter-in-law. If you don't like it, why don't you leave? It's hopeless. I've felt this for a long time, but our way of thinking is just too different, and it's impossible to communicate with them. As I pondered how to respond, Mark hurriedly intervened, asking, "What are you doing, Angela? Don't fight with my parents. This isn't a fair fight. I'm just being verbally attacked for simply being the daughter-in-law, and now I'm being blamed by him again." I thought once more. These two are the same Mark. I can't live with your parents, I asserted. What do you mean you can't? It's making things difficult for me. As my wife, you should follow my lead, right? Before I'm your wife, I'm an individual. Do you think you can just force me to obey? Tom, who had overheard our conversation, exclaimed loudly, "I wouldn't want such a daughter-in-law in my family." Then Mark chimed in, agreeing with Tom, "You might be right. Maybe it's better to divorce a wife who can't respect my parents." I seized the moment. "All right then, let's get a divorce," I declared. The husband who broached the subject of divorce, the wife who agreed. I hoped my smartphone in my pocket recorded that exchange. With a prayerful feeling, I continued. Now that we will be strangers, please return the $240,000 I loaned to Mark for the house construction." Tom and Betty shouted in shock. Mark looked pale, even beyond blue, as he gazed at me. I patiently explained to the clueless Tom and Betty, "You might be misunderstanding, but Mark hasn't contributed a dime to the house purchase. The house was built solely with my savings." "Why?" "Because this man with no sense of planning had zero savings. Even though we both worked, we split living expenses equally from our incomes. We had an agreement to save the remainder in our individual names. But this man wasted his money and saved nothing." Hey, Angela, there's no need to go that far," Mark protested. "It's all true. And yet, when we discussed buying the house, you were adamant that the house be in your name. I do have the loan agreement. You can't pretend it didn't happen," I stated firmly. "No way." Leaving them struck, Mark and his parents were there. I swiftly packed my valuables, clothes, Rosa's favorite toys, and clothes into suitcases and bags. Holding Rosa's beloved stuffed penguin and clothes, I loaded everything into my compact car and quickly drove off, saying goodbye to our newly built home. I then picked up Rosa from the daycare and headed to my parents' house. My parents, in their casual wear, were quite surprised to see me suddenly arrive with loads of baggage. "It's sudden. And if it's inconvenient, I'll just stay in a motel." Hesitantly saying this, my parents rushed to stop me. I later learned that they were worried I might have done something rash with Rosa. In reality, it was the opposite. I had sworn to protect her at all costs. For now, I explained everything to my parents about wanting to split from the worthless Mark and my desire to raise Rosa on my own. My parents promised full support and suggested I stay with them for a while. For me, a working woman, this was a very welcome offer. That evening, I documented everything that had transpired with him and his parents. I also saved the audio recordings of our conversations from my phone to my computer and an external drive. With this evidence in hand, I used my paid leave and weekends to visit several law firms. Finally, I found a trustworthy attorney and officially hired them. Busy days followed, and before I knew it, a week had passed since the day I left our new home. That day after work, someone was waiting for me. It was Mark. I'd like to call him my ex-husband, but sadly, on paper, he's still my husband. I didn't want to talk to him, but I was scared he might lash out. Seeking a public place, we both entered a cafe. I discreetly turned on the recording function on my phone. I calmly asked, "Did you want to talk about something?" "Yeah, about the house." "I'll give it to you, Angela. I'll change the title. In return, can we consider the debt settled? I can't live in that house anymore. Tom and Betty stepped into it before us, didn't they? Why they hung up on such details?" "It's not a minor detail to me. I can't accept it," I replied. I took a sip of my coffee, examining him. His hair was a mess, his beard unshaven, and he looked exhausted. His suit seemed to have not seen an iron or a cleaner for a while. He looked worn out, and I wondered what his life had been like. "Please, Angela, I can't pay back such a huge amount so easily. You knew it was a huge amount when you borrowed it, right?" I even suggested that the house title could be in both our names or just mine. "Remember, you insisted it's my house. It has to be in my name." "That's because I wanted to feel like the owner. As for the divorce, I wasn't serious. I just said it to dare you." "Why did you take it seriously?" "I am serious. I've had enough, and I will divorce you for sure. Not just because you lack responsibility, but I can't deal with such rude parents like yours. I can't believe it. Rosa is waiting for me, so if we're done, I'll leave." "Wait. I'll be the one taking Rosa." His words sent chills down my spine. When I got home, I asked my parents to be cautious so that Rosa wouldn't be forcibly taken away. A few days after his visit, I received a call from the daycare that people who seemed like his parents, Tom and Betty, had shown up. I left work early and rushed to the daycare. Fortunately, I had informed the daycare in advance, so they had Tom and Betty wait in a separate room. They made sure Rosa didn't see them. When I entered the room where Tom and Betty were, I was immediately yelled at. "Give back our granddaughter, you thieving cat." "What do you mean by thieving cat? I haven't stolen anything," I responded. "If you're not a thief, then you're a scammer. You must have done something shady to get all that money. There's no way someone your age has that much," Tom accused. "No, the money I lent to Mark was all mine. It's money I'd earned fair and square. It's my own savings combined with gifts from my parents and grandmother." "What gifts?" "Yes, every year they transfer an amount that wouldn't incur gift tax into my account. The total amount, combined with the money from selling stocks in my name and my savings, is what I lent him." "I can't believe all that money was really yours. Didn't you guys give Mark any gifts while he was alive?" "It's not too late to start," Tom granted, unable to respond. His parents were known for being showy and loved luxury more than anything. They were just regular workers with no passive income, so they likely didn't have much saved up. It was clear they hadn't even thought about gifting any money to their son. "I'm sorry, but I'm divorcing Mark. I'll be taking Rosa and raising her." "Please don't come to the daycare anymore," I declared. With that said, I quickly drove Rosa back to my parents' house. Despite my warning, Mark and his parents showed up several times. Each time, I tried to handle the situation calmly, but there were instances when they'd grab me or shout verbal abuses. I recorded all of these encounters on my phone. About a month after I left our new house, I sent a formal letter through my lawyer demanding repayment of the debt and an agreement to divorce. While Mark mostly agreed, he wanted to fight for Rosa's custody. However, when I threatened to sue him for alimony, he backed down real quick. I had plenty of evidence after all, and they didn't have the funds to cover any payments. It took a while, but I eventually got back the money I lent him, won custody of Rosa, and successfully divorced him. It took longer than expected for Mark to repay the debt because they had trouble selling the new house. I initially thought Mark and his parents would live in the new house together, but they didn't. Simply put, neither Mark nor his parents could afford the $230,000 purchase price. Mark had no savings, and even if they sold the old house his parents lived in, it wouldn't cover the cost. In the end, they had to sell the new house for less than they bought it for, reducing the price multiple times before finding a buyer. The difference in purchase price and the commission on the sale was borrowed from the bank by Mark. Having lost the house and now in debt, he and his parents had to live in their old run-down house. And then Mark's divorced sister moved back in with her 2 teenage sons. The crowded house with 6 adults became notorious in the neighborhood for their constant bickering. They never bothered us again. Given they couldn't even pay child support properly, they probably felt too ashamed to meet us. Years have passed since then, and Rosa is now in 2nd grade. We're living in a rented place near my parents' home. On days when I come home late, my parents look after Rosa. Despite needing help occasionally, we're enjoying our lives. I had thought of never remarrying and continuing our life just the 2 of us. But now I'm seeing someone. He's a 36-year-old man with a daughter in the 1st grade from a previous marriage. We often saw each other during daycare drop-offs and pickups, which led to us talking and eventually him confessing his feelings. Lately, our daughters have been joining us, and the 4 of us have been going out together. The other day, Rosa casually mentioned, if we ever build a house, it would be nice if all 4 of us had our own rooms, and it'd be great if we could have a dog. I was taken aback because not too long ago, the man had proposed to me. Considering our daughters, I've asked him to wait for my answer. But I've made up my mind. Walking over to Rosa, I hugged her and said, "That sounds lovely. If we build a house, we'll make sure everyone is part of the decision, ensuring it's a